afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time you're happening to tune into this. I hope everybody's well out there in the matrix. All you sparks are doing okay. Um, Gonna dig a little deeper today with this topic, but it's actually something that everybody can relate to. It's um, it's called soul fractals. Okay. Now we kind of think of ourselves, if you do, as a soul. But what happens is that every time we have any type of a traumatic experience that we go through, again, from birth, at any point in our lives, when something traumatic happens to us, what happens as a way of dealing with it, a small part of us kind of breaks off as a protection to deal with that situation. Okay. Now, what happens, you just go about your business and everything's fine. You think that you've dealt with it, but what happens is when you get to a certain time in your life, like right now, if you are aware of the ascension process, people kind of understand to a certain degree what their inner child is about, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. So if you use that as an example to understand that you don't just have an inner child with traumatic experiences, that you can help your adult self by going back and revisiting, right? To help resolve. Because again, you have to look at that inner child as an entity and a being that still exists and still needs your attention and your help, because again you can look at it as it fractured off and is traumatized, and that's why you do work like that on yourself. Okay, it's for a reason. It helps the present version of yourself be more integrated, feel better, less anxiety, less stress. And if you're one of the individuals on the planet that actually gets to this inner work and the self work, good for you, because that means you've gotten past your ego. You've gotten past all of the excuses of pointing and saying, no, it's your fault if you didn't do this to me. That's a defense mechanism. That's victim mentality. And if you're in that, then none of this is going to make sense to you. So hopefully, if you're listening to this, everything that I talk about is from a standpoint of you wanting to help yourself become a more calm, relaxed, integrated, happier, higher vibrating individual. And again, that's where the hard work comes in, and just getting to that phase is commendable. So good for you, and those are all the people I'm talking to. And everything that I speak to is stuff that I go through myself. So usually when I put one of these videos out, it's because I recently just went through something that kind of reminded me enough that if I'm going through this, other people are going through this. Because as you can see, I don't put out a lot of videos. I'm never going to be monetized. I don't sell anything. I truly just try to help people. And so anyway, we are going through an ascension process right now. Okay. But not everybody is having the same experience. Ascending and feeling good is a personal process. If you're driving down the same street, five different cars, there's five different worlds going on. Each person is having their own experience. And so that's when you start to look at it that way, you take the time to look inside of you. And so, anyway, when you get to that standpoint, what I'm talking about today is, again, soul fractals. Everybody who's heard of personality disorders, right? When people have multiple personality disorders. Well, guess what? That's a real thing. There's enough movies, there's enough scientific facts that when something traumatizing happens to a person, they literally have a split personality that's very much alive inside of them. Um, you can call it the child, the defender, the weaker person. We all have multiple selves inside our one self. Okay, so when you understand that, you kind of can understand that when you're having difficulties and feeling certain ways about things, one thing that you can do is you can go back into your past and just start with anything traumatizing that actually happened to you. Okay. that you went through something that was, you know, a girl broke up with you, let's say. You could be in college, your first crush that you had, where all of a sudden the woman or the man broke up with you. Well, that can be so traumatizing at the time that in order to deal with it, a certain part of your soul actually fractures off of you and gets compartmentalized as a way of dealing with it. So now that part of you is always there. That part of you is always still hurt. In order to deal with that at the time, though, it kind of broke off from you. Now, to a larger degree of what you see in the movies is when it's so traumatizing that the person is just, boom, 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 boom. They can switch into like Sybil, like this. There's a lot of different movies that you see. I'm drawing a blank where the guy literally had like 10 different personalities, and depending on what got triggered outside, these different personalities can present themselves. Now, again, this is true. I mean, it's proven. If you do your own research, this isn't some woo woo bullshit. So again, understand that's a smaller degrees. We all have these little fractals that kind of splinter off from us, and the key to feeling like a whole individual is to pull these different offshoots of ourselves back into ourself. Okay, the longer you're on this planet, the more splinters we develop. Okay, and so that's why you can be sitting here doing all of the work, all of the meditation. I'm eating right, I'm exercising and everything, but still have certain things that are going on inside of you that never get resolved. It's like, okay, well then again, you're gonna have to get to this level of self awareness and self work where you sit back with yourself and beyond being a child. Again, that's obviously very important. From 0 up till 15 or 16, those are our most impressionable times. And we want to try to remember all the traumatic experiences that we went through. But even beyond that, let's go back to that example of when you were let's say you went through your first breakup, right? Your first breakup is crushing. A lot of times adults minimize it. They're like, oh, you'll get over it and everything. It's like, no. Sometimes your first love breakup, let's say, can be so traumatizing that you never really heal from that. And if you don't address it, you'd kind of never have a normal relationship again. Let's say a guy gets dumped, when he's at a certain age and everything. He's gonna pretty much the rest of his life feel like he's not good enough, that he's not, okay, that like what did I do wrong? It can become self-critical. That little tape can start spinning in your head where you're just willing to self-sacrifice yourself and keep giving, and then you're attracting the type of relationship where you're getting a narcissist that just takes and takes. So anyway, if it happens on a more subtle level where these personalities aren't jumping out, and freaking the rest of the world out because they're speaking another language and they're going from a calm person to a violent person, those are the most extreme examples of it. But in a much more subtle way that most people don't see, a lot of times these fractals that are broken up from us out of anger or unresolvement can come back in and start driving our experiences. Because again, let's say you're an adult, you're a father, you're a son, you're a coworker, you're a neighbor, you're all of these different things that you present depending on the situation. Well, the same thing happens inside of us, that when certain things are presented to us, certain parts of us present themselves to deal with that. So it's up to us and up to you. Again, if you're good and you're feeling fine and you're just, everything's okay, you don't get triggered, then you're way ahead of most people. But usually what happens is that you get triggered by something, and that's when you get stressed and everything. Well, that's something, not in the moment, of course, but when you're sitting back, remember those times when you got triggered by something, and try to sit and try to remember where or when something like that first happened. And I guarantee your higher self, your oversoul is trying to resolve and bring in all of those broken or fractals, they call them soul fractals, that kind of splintered off from us as we kind of go along. There could be 10 of them, there could be 100 of them out there, but everybody has them. And the key is to pull them back in. And you can do that by just sitting with yourself and going over all of the times that something traumatic happened to you. I promise you can be your own therapist. You don't need to spend millions of dollars, and you really don't need to go over it with a fine tooth comb. A lot of times, if you just remember and go, that was a very traumatic experience, and that did really affect me, you know, um, and kind of pull that experience back in and see how you've learned from it, see how you might have dealt with it now as opposed to how you dealt with it then. And just doing that, it's almost like seers, people that see energy, almost see that fractured part of themselves kind of come back in and all of a sudden meld with yourself. And then it's like, okay, I I reconciled that. That's not an issue anymore. And all of a sudden you feel more whole. You feel like a more integrated individual because that's what you are, when you do things like that. Now, some of them will be more obvious than others. And I don't know if I'm going to cut this part out, but the reason that this came up and that I'm actually doing this tape right now is that last night and pay attention to your dreams, okay? Because a lot of times if you're having a kind of like a traumatic dream that's coming up, it could be one of these splintered parts of yourself trying to reconcile things, okay? So sometimes dreams are just crazy dreams, the beef and broccoli it got to me a little bit, but then there's other types of dreams where it's like, no, that was something. And I'm going to give you a personal example. um, First of all, everything's going good with me right now. Um, from a psychological standpoint, on the surface, you'd say things are going better for me right now than they have in a really long time. Okay, not that there aren't still a lot of things that are going on to work on, but this dream that I had last night, it just fucking floored me, and it was like, holy shit. And that led to this video, because in this dream I was going to commit suicide. I was resigned that I was done. I was just a walking corpse. I was wrapping up a bunch of things. I was thinking about calling my father. I was thinking about who am I going to leave my money. Not that I have a lot of money saved up, but towards, so the state didn't get it. And I was just so hollow and sad that, again, that was my dream. I don't remember why. I don't remember what was going on. I know that it wasn't anything happening to me because I actually put it to the next day. Like, I still had a couple of things to do. But the point is that I was so sad in this dream that I was done. I was just done. And so when I woke up, I literally remembered waking up like, like, thank God that was just a dream. Like, what the fuck was that? Like, I'm getting ready to start a new job. I got some money coming in. I got some money saved. You know, uh, things like I said are pretty damn good right now. Like, where the fuck did that come from? It was like, really. So again, as I'm sitting there thinking about this, going, where did this come from? One of the first videos that I popped on when I get up, I don't watch regular TV. I don't watch the regular news and stuff. I see a video where they're talking about fractals and how different dreams are trying to talk to you and everything. And so I was like, okay. So I'm sitting back, and all of a sudden I'm remembering. I'm remembering a time 19 years ago where I felt suicidal. I talked about it in past videos. I kind of felt that everything was done. There was no point in going on, and I was okay with it. It was like, this is where life, this is the cards that life gave you. I almost felt like I was being a man about it, even like, all right, listen, I had a good life up till this point. I was pretty much blessed and everything. And so, anyway, what I realized was that that event was so traumatizing at that point in my life. I must have had what's called a soul fractal break off in order to deal with that. And this dream that I had was that part of myself trying to reconcile. That was my oversoul trying to pull that back into me because, as theory would have it, and what this whole video is about, that's how you protect yourself. But those traumatic experiences, which that was, and again, it was like 19 years ago, it's still out there. It's still, broken off from you. It never goes very far, but until it gets resolved, it's still, again, it served you at the time to protect you, and it helped me to keep moving on and dealing with things, because obviously I didn't kill myself. But there was a little bit of a time where I pretty much wrote myself off. So anyway, that was very traumatizing, and it was 19 years ago. And so this dream was so vivid, and it was so real that, like I said, when I woke up, I was like, what? So I've spent most of the morning, thank God it's a Saturday, I didn't have to work. Um, I felt like I reconciled that now. I remembered feeling that way. And here's the key: I honored and respected the fact that I felt that way. And it's not a matter of really forgiving, it's just a matter of honoring and recognizing. And so I kind of felt like I brought that part back into myself, and I resolved it. And I had a good cry, to be honest with you. Not that it was a pity party, but it was just like I understood why I felt that way. Because, when something like that happens and you move past it, you almost don't want to remember a situation like that. You kind of want to get like that. Well, that's kind of like the point of what I'm talking about. Whenever you have a traumatic experience, a part of you will break off. And now, as we're looking to ascend, there's a whole ascension process going on. Um, all of our stuff is coming up, is coming out of us. And if you're not dealing with it and honoring it and recognizing it, and again, here's the key: forgiving yourself. Hindsight's always 2020. It's always easier to look back on something and say, I should have done it this way, or I should have done it that way. Now, again, that's a lot better than pointing the finger and saying, no, if that motherfucker didn't do this to me, and at least you're out of victim mode. But to take it the next further, is the flip side, is a lot of times we're our own worst enemies. We're the ones that don't cut slack for ourselves. And so the point is that there's a balance in the middle, and you have to. It's easy to. That's why they say hindsight is 2020. Once you're past something and you see all of the consequences, or you see all the other decisions that you might have had, and you're calmer and you're not in the throes of the emotions, you can recognize that you might have done things a little bit different. But the key is not to beat yourself up for that, because you know that's the game. You can really only make the best decisions you can in the moment. So if you're self-analyzing and you're looking back on what you went through, and you saw that if you would have kind of not overreacted, or maybe you could have done that, or maybe you jumped the gun and you made a decision a little too quickly, that's good. But the point is don't beat yourself up. Having the ability and the calmness and the rationale of looking back and saying, well, why didn't you do it that way then? Like, why were you so stupid? How dumb could you be? Because that's when you can become your own worst enemy. Like, when I was in Ecuador, I lent a lot of money to people that I trusted. And so there were times, years, that I would get so mad at myself. Like, how could you be so stupid? How could you trust these people? You didn't know them that long. Blah 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 blah. It's like, because I did. I'm a trusting person. I would never do that to somebody. I could never steal somebody's money like that. So I kind of had to forgive myself, you know, and I'm sure that that's a fractal that I had to pull back in. Because for years, if I wasn't raging and wanting to kill that person for doing it to me, the flip side of that was that I was just calling myself the biggest, dumbest idiot that ever came down the pike. Like, here's my money, there you go. It's like you have to forgive yourself with everything, actually. That's the key. Hindsight's always 2020. So again, to anybody that's looking to raise their vibration, to make themselves feel better in themselves, to make themselves more whole, especially if you're doing all the exterior things. I'm exercising, I'm getting my sleep, I'm drinking my water, I'm meditating, I'm doing all these things, but I'm still feeling anxiety, I'm still feeling this and that and everything. Well, now you're getting to the level, which is good, where you probably need to pull in what are called these soul fractals, these portions of ourselves that are kind of out and about, that have splintered off of us, that we kind of need to reconcile and pull back. Okay, now we all have them. You can't be judgmental, and you have to kind of just sit and rationalize, the best thing is that you don't have to really go over all of every little detail of all of them. Sometimes just sitting and saying and meditating and saying, I call back all of the hurt aspects and soul fractures that have splintered off to me. It's time to come back into one unified being. When you start doing this, I'm telling you, it's like you can, like, it's hard to measure, but from this dream that I had last night about pulling back in that time period where I was ready to write myself off, I felt better about myself. I really feel like I didn't, and the thing is, I didn't even know that was out there. I didn't even know I had to do that. So that's why pay attention to your dreams, because your dreams are trying to tell you something. If you got aches and pains and certain memories, or again, I keep saying triggers come up, don't blame the other person. Don't blame, the guy on the road that set you off or something. It means it's your own higher self trying to, ring your bell to pull you back into something that you need to reconcile. Because every little piece that you reconcile of trauma raises your vibration, makes you feel better. And like I said, we're all walking around in our own worlds. Some people are absolutely miserable right now because they're just not dealing with their issues that are coming up. So, whatever's coming up, don't deny it. Don't try to push it back down. Sit with it, remember it, and you can be your own therapist and you can be your own. So, anyway, I hope that's helped. I hope that made a little bit of sense. Anybody has any questions or would like to get any further, I always leave my email in the descriptions, or feel free to comment. And be kind to yourself and be kind to others out there, because we're all ascending, but we're all doing it our own way and we're all having our own experience. All right, everybody. Peace.